Yeah, I feel like money is intensely spiritual. And so I just look at it like everything's God's and I'm a steward. I'm just here to manage what's here. A lot of people really get, I think, kind of weird about money or go after a lot of money. And it's, yeah, I have big money goals, but it's about impact. It's about, and I think that, also God wants us to be able to have money, to be able to give it and be a blessing. And so I just think, being reminded of, hey, everything I have is, I think God has a thought on how I use it and what I do with it.
Hello, everybody. Brett Swarts here, Capital Gains Tax Solutions, and we're here for another Build It to Billions podcast. Excited to have our next guest on the show. Before we go there, I do want to thank everyone for being a part of the show. We're now, I think, around 100 episodes on the Build It to Billions podcast, and then we're also about 300 plus episodes on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channel. So all the support out there means the world to me. Thank you so much. Each and every episode, we're bringing on the top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires, and they're sharing their insights, wisdom, and secrets with us so we can scale our wealth, impact, and ultimately give more, all of it away. As we scale from millions to billions is really what we're trying to learn. And today's guest is going to help us do just that. In fact, we're talking about developing a rich brain with our guest, which is going to be really cool. He's coming out with a book on this. And essentially, our guest is a passive income creator. He's a Mailbox Money show host, passive income creator, keynote speaker, author of the upcoming book, Rich Brain Again, How the Wealthy Change Their Brain to Change Their Bank Account. He's an expert when it comes to real estate and syndications, as well as helping people build passive real estate and income lifestyles. Please welcome to the show with me, Mr. Bronson Hill. Bronson, how are you doing?
Hey, Brad, excited to be here, man. Build to billions. That's a great topic. Love what you guys are creating here.
Absolutely. And for our listeners get to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit about your story and your current focus?
Sure, yeah. So I was a well-paid medical sales professional. Like a lot of people, I worked hard, I made good money, but I just didn't have enough time, right? I worked with a couple physicians, selling stuff in the OR, wearing scrubs, going into surgery. It was very interesting, but I had a couple of physicians I worked with that made literally millions of dollars a year, but they paid high taxes and they would basically work 60 to 80 hours a week every week. And I was like, well, that doesn't really seem like financial freedom to me. So I started to learn, I kind of did what a lot of people do is they bought a rental house, bought a few of them, had 4 rental houses, realized I was creating another job for myself. So as much as I wanted to, fire myself, as my first book talks about, and really go and create this other life for me where I could do all these things, I was creating another job. And so really, I learned about syndication, I learned about larger deals where you could be more passive. I actually was able to start raising some capital for that. And so now, we fast forward 5-6 years, we've raised about $50 million for different real estate, private equity deals. We help people to get cash flow, appreciation, and tax benefits by investing in various types of deals.
Awesome. And man, that's really cool. And then now you're looking and focus on the rich brain, right? And so let's talk about what does that mean and what's the number one secret to developing a rich brain?
Yeah, so it's interesting. In the process of raising $50 million, I've talked to a lot of investors. I know you have as well. So I've had 2,500 one-on-one conversations, been able to interview and ask questions and really just learn some things about these people that, are investing and what really makes them successful. And so it used to be, and this is something I thought too, is that you came from money, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, or you weren't, right? So a lot of people think that, and they talk about this kind of like I said, you have class warfare, right? That there's the haves and the have-nots, and you just are what you are. But it's just the facts really are the exact opposite. Fidelity Investments had a study that came out in 2019 that said that 86% of millionaires are self-made, right? So almost 9 out of 10 people did not inherit it. They did not get it gifted. They actually figured out a way through their mindset and through their habits to like, how do I actually figure out how to become wealthy? And so wealthy is not what you have. It's the habits, the things you learn, and it's doing those things consistently over time. So the biggest thing I've really learned about this, Brett, is that a lot of people that are not wealthy, they don't have written goals. They don't really have things they're trying to go after. There's not a lot of mindset practices. The average American reads, I think, less than 8 books a year. Some, 50% read 4 books or less a year. And, it's just this idea of learning and the idea of openness and really having a mindset. A lot of people that are very, very wealthy, and a lot of them as well, they'll do things like affirmations. They'll do things like a vision board. They'll create goals. I just was with Grant Cardone yesterday, hosted an event with him, and he literally writes his goals down every single day. What are my goals for the day? What am I trying to achieve? And so there's some stuff around mindset that I found to be super, super valuable in there.
Interesting. And so what one really stuck out the most, or what do you feel like the one is the most challenging for for most people, or the one that was most surprising?
Yeah, so I think the most surprising thing to me that came out of this is the idea, I call it wealth worthiness. And so wealth worthiness, it's basically, how worthy do I feel of having millions of dollars or billions of dollars, right? Do I feel worthy? A lot of us come from, we feel like we're comfortable with where we're at. The person who makes, you'll see this in the workplace, somebody who makes 100,000 a year will just usually kind of find a way to make 100,000 a year. And the person who's making a millionaire will find a way to figure out how to, it's like a thermometer, right? Those kind of be at a certain level and they'll figure out a way to kind of make that. And what really determines that? It's a worthiness that we assign to ourselves. So we show up, and if we, feel like we're not worthy of this great business deal or making lots of money, we will actually self-sabotage. And so you see this in people's actions. Now, most people, it generally, for successful people, it goes very kind of slow sequential over the time. Somebody has a certain job, they're making 100,000, then they get a raise, they get a new job, they're making 150,000, then 200,000. Then over time, it kind of scales over time. But you'll see some people, they make this 20, 30, 50, 100x jump in their net worth in a short period of time. Well, how does that happen? It's because they have created the worthiness for that ahead of time, right? And when I talk about wealth worthiness, it sounds a little woo-woo, but if you can imagine it this way, it works in other areas of life as well. If I'm a single guy, right, and I show up at a party and I see a beautiful woman across the room, and I want to go over and have a conversation with her, right? Because she's a beautiful woman. Maybe, there's a connection for a relationship, maybe. But yet my self-talk has been, oh my gosh, I'm ugly. She'd never like me. What do I have to offer anybody? I'm probably not even going to go over and talk to her. And if I do, we're going to talk. How do you think that conversation is going to go? Right? Probably not very well. Versus if I'm somebody and I'm like, hey man, I've got something to offer and I'm good. It's this self-talk that we say to ourselves, or even we said to ourselves in the past. And so what it really is, it's this worthiness that we have around ourselves. And so I've seen in my life this huge connection between personal development and really increasing your value, your worthiness, and how you are able to receive that, and the ability to have this stuff. This is how I 20x my net worth in 4 years, going to a seven-figure net worth in just a very short period of time, because of doing this, right? Having a practice. And there are some specific practices around building wealth worthiness. But I think that was probably the most surprising thing to me, is to see that some people do it gradually over time. Most people never get there. And then some people have a very, very quick jump. And the people that have a quick jump is that they've created it through specific practices to be able to get there.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and I love the way the practical, break that down, right? For the, girl across the room, right, or the guy across the room. If you're a girl looking at like you've got to have that confidence and that belief in yourself, and so it's the wealth part of it, the belief in the self to be, bigger than where you're at today, and ability to even think before you're going to go there. Okay, that makes sense to me. What's the next, maybe best secret of the rich brain that you've learned so far?
So the question really from there, Brett, is okay, so now we know wealth worthiness is a thing, right? Well, what do I do if I don't feel worthy of, making millions of dollars this year or billions of dollars? How do I actually develop that? And so this is a practice that I realized, it's called, I call it Whisperings, wealth Whisperings. And really, it's similar to affirmations, but it's different. Affirmations are standing in the mirror and saying certain things. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me. People joke about this stuff, right? That it's kind of funny. But we have this self-talk all the time. And there's these things that we whisper to ourselves, right? We tell ourselves things. When we're kids, we learn it. We do it. Everybody talks to themselves. If you don't think you talk to yourself, you're talking. You have this inner monologue going all the time. And so the wealth whisperings are things, and worthiness whisperings, they're around just creating higher value to yourself. So one that I do, that, and these are very personal, right? They're very personal based on your values. So I say, as a beloved son of God, I'm worthy of love and belonging, and I'm valuable. And I say things to myself like this, and I do say them in the mirror, and I say to myself, I whisper them, I look in different places. And what happens is the more, we have these tapes in our mind from when we're a kid, that when a bully said something, or when our older brother or somebody said something that was hurtful, or somebody said, hey, you're never going to be good at this, or you're never going to get this job, or you're not smart. We play those tapes. And so the thing is, we need to find new tapes, and we need to replay them. We need to, put them everywhere. It's like, if I want to meditate on spiritual readings, I know you're a Christian as well. So we want to meditate on these things. It's the same thing. We need to meditate on truth. What is true? What do I want to believe is true about myself? And once you get that right, then the doors start to open, because you show up in a way where, and to be honest, I started doing this, and for about 3 to 6 months, I didn't really feel any change. And to a little bit of my story, I'm actually divorced. I went through a divorce about 8 years ago, unfortunately. And I came out of that just feeling no sense of personal confidence. Like, oh my gosh, am I okay? Who am I for a relationship, whatever? And so I started creating with my words. I think there's significant that creating with our words for things we want for the future. So I started creating this. And after 3 to 6 months, I started to feel like, wow, I actually do feel this inner confidence, whatever. And I would show up in a totally different way than I was even just months before. So I think that, like, again, it takes time, but if you commit to do it, you do begin to change the programming and you start to transform the way your mind thinks. And you show up in a way that shows, hey, I really am worthy. I really am awesome. And, not just relationships, but also in business. And so there's ways, going back to the wealth side, we'll sabotage a deal, will sabotage, different things in business or even in investing because we don't really believe that we're worthy of it.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And then the Romans 12, it talks about be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's a practice, and it's a daily, a daily discipline spiritually, and daily discipline with laying your life down the way the Bible calls it, as a living sacrifice. Right. And so talk about the things that you've had, the hardest things that the rich brain has to give up or has to sacrifice in order to begin the renewal process.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that, for people to change, it's been said that the pain of going forward the same way has to be greater than the pain of change, right? We none of us really want to change. Right? Change is hard, it's challenging, whatever. So we have to embrace change. We have to be willing to say, hey, I'm going to do something different. And I think that, she mentioned in some scripture, says God can do exceedingly more above all we can ever think or even imagine, right? I can imagine a lot. I can imagine a lot of things. And it's not just, hey, I want to get more money, right? This is a building the billions show. But I think that we need to have a greater vision for ourselves. Another scripture I love is without vision, people perish. It doesn't matter what your faith is, right? Because if I don't have a vision for my life, I'm going to fall into all kinds of things, right? I can fall into drugs, I can fall into whatever. I'm going to numb the pain. I'm going to try to do things that I feel are just pleasure for the things that I want, but they don't really have some greater vision. So I'm always continually creating bigger vision for myself. And I think that's a huge, huge thing, is that someone has to say, hey, okay, I want wealth, but I want to use it for this. Like, one of my big whys is I want to try to end modern day human slavery in the world. Right? That's a big, hairy, audacious goal. There's 20 to 40 million human slaves. A lot of people don't realize this. That's more than there has been in the history of the world. Slavery is not gone. It's just changed and gone underground. It's in other countries. 20 to 40 million is about 3 times the size of Los Angeles, right? So the Los Angeles, it's so many people, millions of people, keeps getting worse. So that's not going to change unless people actually say, hey, I have a vision for this, and here's some things I can do to get involved with this cause. So for other people, it might be like, hey, I want to get to serve my family in this way. I want to keep creating. So I think the transforming process is you have to let yourself be in the place of imagining and dreaming and creating, or else what happens is you just get stuck in only what I see, only what I experience, only what's happened in the past, right? Because the problem is the past is our experience and what educates us to now. But if you're going to take a 20x or 100x jump, you've got to become a different person, right? In the book 10x is easier than 2x, Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan talk about, the authors, an incredible book, 10x is easier than 2x. They say for you to be a 10x person, 10x the amount of revenue, 10x the amount of impact, 10x the relationships, you actually have to become a different person. You've actually got to step into, like, what would that person, what would it feel like to be that person? And so you've got to create that. I'll give an example of this. I've been speaking this 10x over my life. Like, okay, I want to be this 10x person, whatever, and just creating bigger, more wealth, whatever, these types of things in my life. Well, an opportunity came around. There was a really big business opportunity, and I would have said no to it. And actually, I kind of said no, but then I started to realize, well, actually, this is something that I've been wanting to create for myself. And it's about a 5x. It'll about 5x our business revenue almost overnight. So we're kind of course, recording this now. Hopefully next week we'll be done with it. But it's been 6 or 7 months of process. But it's a private business deal that if we get it done, it's going to have a dramatic effect in our life. So a lot of times, again, we create it and then it shows up in our life. And not only does it show up, but we're able to see it and we're able to receive it. Whatever things you ask for in prayer, believe that you'll receive them and you'll have them, right? So this is all like biblical principles, right? If you can't imagine it, if you can't see it, if you can't speak it and put it out there, how are you ever going to see it when it comes along, right?
100%. No, this is beautiful. I heard John Maxwell says it really well. Like, you can prepare for tomorrow, or you can repair yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, if you're not focusing on or visualizing, hey, what do you want? I think a lot of people don't take the time to write down what they want, and not only what they want, but what do they want the most? Yeah. Like, because we can talk about all the things we want, but what do you want the most? And then what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of that? And you keep going deeper and deeper, deeper. What's the purpose of that? And then what's the next step I can to take to get there, right? And like, yeah. and then taking that action. And so all of these things are there. And I think I think one of the things I've been studying is time is short, right? It's just the brevity and urgency of time. So, talk a little bit about the rich brain and how urgency and how the best move, with the sense of calling in urgency.
Yeah, so I think it's important. There's this phenomenon that I've realized. I think you're younger than I am, Brett, but I think just the older I get, the more I realize time just goes quicker. It's like it's weird when my daughter is 12 and I see her, and it's like it just seems so long to to get to be 18 or 16 or whatever these landmarks are. But my dad is 73. And he just says to me sometimes, he's like, "Yeah, I just feel like I'm just out of college myself." He just feels like it's just been you kind of blink and it goes faster. And I was asking another friend, like, how do you manage that? Like, what do you try to do to make it slow down or whatever? He said, "Well," I said, "I don't think you make it slow down. You just try to ride the waves. You just try to make the most of each moment." But I find myself catching myself saying like, "Oh, 20 years ago, such and such happened." I'm like, "Oh, that guy was talking about 20 years ago." But I think that it's really important that we are very mindful around what we want in our lives. And this is where I think, so again, there's two parts to this. One is doing the work, right? Doing what's important to you, living out those, doing the work, doing the actual activities, be involved with the people and the relationships and the wealth and the impact things you want. But make sure you take time weekly, quarterly, yearly, get away and reflect. And is what I'm doing right now, is it accomplishing the results that I want? And if it's not, what do I need to change? And that's also a very spiritual process, right? And pray, "Oh, God, what do you want? What do you want what do you want from my life here? What do you want to do?" Because, and it really is Michael Gerber talks about this on the business sense, where he says, as an entrepreneur, the goal is not to work in a business, but to work on the business. And I think about that as kind of taking a step back and seeing like kind of that tinkering, what's working, what's not working. So I think there's this kind of like being in for, working hard, doing it, but make sure you schedule time. I do it once a quarter. I'll go away for 2 or 3 nights and I'll just kind of have a reflection time and, hey, what's working, what's not working, get the whiteboard out and get the journal out and just, talk about goals for the quarter and do all that, because it's really important, because if you don't, you're just simply you're going to continue to work, and you say, man, these results are just not quite where I want them.
Yeah, John Maxwell calls it like, building a ladder on the wrong wall, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and you look up and you're like, man, I'm climbing this ladder. And you look up and you go, wait, oh no, I want it to be on that other wall over there. I want it to be the other place over there. And you're like, oh no. And you've lost all this time. So I couldn't agree with you more, right? Am I doing right now what truly matters? I think the other thing is having more of an eternal mindset versus a temporary mindset. I think also it's simplifying, the most important. Like, don't trade what's priceless for what's profitable, right?
Yeah.
Don't trade what's unique to you for something someone else can do, and making sure that you're creating and planning and preparing for what you want, rather than going back into the default of what the world and urgency and the day-to-day brings to you, right? Like it's such a discipline. So what other thoughts do you have on the rich brain, or thoughts on that?
Yeah, so again, I wrote the book, and then I realized I was trying to do too much. So I wrote, basically Rich Habits and Rich Networks. So there's other things that wealthy people do. It's just amazing. If you want to become anything, you want to become in better shape, health wise. You want to, I know you're an athlete as well. If you want to be, somebody who's spiritual in a certain way, if you want to have a better, more wealth, you've got to get around people that are 5, 10, 100x of where you are. And so there's a saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So I've got to be willing to put myself around, people that are successful. And so I think with wealth, it's very, very true. I want to be the least smart person in a lot of rooms, right? And maybe not the least, maybe the second least smart person, right? So every point someone else, but I want to be in rooms that like I really have no business in being in. I'm going to be in rooms where I want to create rooms where it's amazing people. We just had an event last week with Ken McElroy, Russ Gray, a former NFL player named Devin Kennard, and just hear from people that are doing amazing things, because it's going to continue to help me to grow and push me up. And so I think for everybody, being willing to get around people that are successful, that are wealthy, that have vision for their life, that are living out their goals and their dream, they have a great family life, they're really investing in their kids, those kind of things. And so I think that those things are incredibly valuable. And so, but when it comes to mindset, I think it's just really having the idea of, okay, what is it I want to create, really creating it and continue to come back and refine that. And every year I started making goals. It was the first year I started making written goals, was 2020. And I've achieved all those goals. And I've, just every single year, I have these big, hairy, audacious goals. I have about 10 or 12 each year. I read them every morning. I don't, complete all of them. Usually I complete about half of them. And the other ones I make progress on, some I don't make any progress on, but at least I have them in front of me. And what happens is, again, wealthy people that have, they continue to create out in front of them. And that's the biggest thing is, Tony Robbins even says that about 80% of success in life is psychology, just getting the correct mindset. And that's where I've seen if I have a breakthrough in my mindset or breakthrough in my personal development, it leads to a breakthrough in business. I've seen almost every time very quickly.
Phenomenal. Bronson Hill, you ready for the lightning round?
Ready. Light me
All
on
right.
fire, man.
Knowing what you know now, if you go back to your Fire Yourself book, what's the one thing that you would maybe change or have added to it?
It's a good question. I think that I would probably, what would I have changed about it? I think it's a great book. I think people should get it. So I think, it's a primer basically on how people get introduced to passive investing. And I think I would, I don't know if I'd really changed much about it. I mean, I think that we didn't really put much mindset in there. Maybe put a little more mindset in there about it, but I think that's probably the only thing I would change.
Cool. Awesome. What's the number one book you've recommended most the past year?
Well, I said that one, that 10x is easier than 2x.
Yeah.
That's an incredible book. My top book of all time that I recommend a lot is Brené Brown, a book called The Gifts of Imperfection. And it's more of a personal development book. It talks about owning your story and just really living from a place of authenticity. And just you're so much happier. Everybody's so much better served when you can just show up and be who you are.
That's awesome. Question number 3. What are you most curious about right now?
Most curious about. I right now I'm really into private equity deals. I love, for example, multifamily deals. We're seeing a cap rate of 5 to 7%, which is like if you paid in cash, you get a 5 to 7% return. All these private equity kind of mid-sized deals, we're seeing a 30 to 35% cap rate, right? So just much, much higher, like 5, 6, 7 times the return. So I'm just really geeking out, and we're doing a lot in that space.
As am I, and none of our listeners working with Bronson, we start sending me more of these opportunities as they come up. So that's cool. Next question: how are you best using AI right now?
We use it all the time. Okay, there's something I just discovered. Somebody mentioned something on an Instagram reel, but it's called a mind movie. So if you Google mind movie, Joe Dispenza talks about it. It's about a 2-minute movie that just is basically video images, and it has phrases that it basically plays for you, and it kind of plays for you the life that you're creating. It's absolutely incredible. I highly recommend it.
Okay, mind movie. Check it out, everybody. Yeah. Next question. Number one way you're using ChatGPT.
So I use it to create my mind movie as well. We use it a lot for our content. I use it for health. I use it for so many things. Just, hey, what do I do in this situation? How do I solve this problem? I love the deep research button, which is if you have the $20 version of ChatGPT, it will basically, what would take you 8 to 10 hours of research. You basically type in, hey, I want to know about building ADUs in my backyard, or whatever. And it will basically go in and ask you a few follow-up questions. And then you hit it, and it takes 5 to 10 minutes, but it will do this 8 to 10 hours of research. It'll give you this basically report on all this stuff, and it's amazing. It really is amazing. So I recommend that one as well.
I get blown away with it. I swear, like every day, I'm learning something new. Very cool. Number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by.
I think the number one theme really is just the servant leadership. Jesus did it. Just how do you show up and serve people. And it's not always easy. I'm not always good at it, but I think it's just, and I think also just authenticity, just trying to show up. I'd rather err on the side of being a little too vulnerable, a little too honest, than to be just a little bit like too polished. And I think that's one adjustment from being very corporate for a long time, is trying to like learn how to take off the armor and just show up and just be who you are. The one thing that people know, like, it's not safe for work to share certain things, but like the beauty about what we do is you can just show up and really be who you are, and people are drawn to that. So authenticity really draws people in.
Amazing. Bronson, I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing your wisdom with us on being and developing a rich brain. I want to thank you for serving people and helping to build passive income plans and financial freedom. Last question, and then you'll remind us where we can find you. Stewardship over ownership. What's the number one way that you try to practice that on a daily? What helps you to stay centered in your values?
Yeah, so I read my values each morning. I read my goals each morning. I just look at everything. I mean, I feel like money is intensely spiritual. And so I just look at it like everything's God's, and I'm a steward. I'm just here to manage what's here. A lot of people really get, I think, kind of weird about money or go after a lot of money. And it's, I have big money goals, but it's about impact. It's about, and I think that, also God wants us to be able to have money, to be able to give it and be a blessing. And so I just think, being reminded of, hey, everything I have is, I think God has a thought on how I use it and what I do with it.
Mhm. Awesome. And for our listeners who want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
So I have a free gift for your listeners, Brett. I know you're all about trying to help people grow their wealth, especially saving taxes with your DSTs, which are incredible. We have a guide that I wrote. It's called How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage. So everybody's tired of the pain of inflation, but there's a way you can get on the other side of the equation and actually have it benefit you rather than hurt you. So if this is 40 color pages, it's some really unique strategies involving real estate, debt, even precious metals and borrowing, and it's just some really cool stuff. So if you text the word inflation to 33777, so you text the word inflation to 33777, we'll send that to you as a free gift, and also you hear about kind of our upcoming stuff that we're working on.
Awesome. Bronson Hill, thank you so much for being on the show. Again, I appreciate your time that you spent with us today. Truly awesome. So also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build to Billions podcast, also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channel. Hey, we're on this journey to scale from millions to billions with you for the entrepreneur, the investor, in following ways to do this by having a stewardship and over ownership mindset and biblical billionaire principles, and bringing on guests like Mr. Bronson Hill to teach us ways to do just that by having a rich brain, developing and reminding us of ways to grow in our mindset and our practice and our habits. So take this information and take action. And we appreciate everyone listening today. And we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye now.